The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Real change never takes place from the top on down, but always from the bottom on up.
Bernie Sanders' healthcare for all idea is gaining steam.
Nobody in America works 40 hours a week, should be living in poverty. So our economy is rigged. We have a campaign finance system which is corrupt.
Sanders leading the charge to stop war against Yemen. The first time.
I was tempted to play the entire ad, all of the audio from the ad, but I'm quite sure you have listened to this and watched this video at least half a dozen times already. At least most of you in the audience. And man, what a day! What a day to have a second day for my comeback. Then today, Senator Bernie Sanders has thrown his hat into the ring for the 2020 election, and let's just be real, he's the front runner, hands down. End of conversation. He's the front runner for no other reason than the fact that he has an entire infrastructure that he left in 2016 ready for 2020. So many things to talk about. I do think Bernie can win against Donald Trump. There's a lot of stuff that I should get into, and I'm sure I will have to get into in terms of Bernie supporters versus like angry Hillary supporters and angry Bernie supporters and the proverbial Bernie bros and the same problems that I talked about in 2015. I will get to that, but I don't know if I'll get into it in this episode. What's funny about this is that I all along, you know, how do I say this? I almost have fatigue enough from 2016 to not have wanted Bernie Sanders to run again. I have to be honest with you. 2016 did damage to everybody. And I know some of you don't care who all it did damage to, but it did damage to Hillary Clinton supporters. It did damage to Bernie Sanders supporters. It created a level of hatred between those two camps that I don't know if we're able to overcome for the 2020 election. I still don't know that we're able to overcome it. But I have to admit, I'm glad that Bernie Sanders jumped into the race. It's going to be what it's going to be. And the question is, do we, and it's not the candidates. I don't think it ever was the candidates. And this was something I was trying to convey in 2015 and 2016, that it never really was the candidates so much as it was the stubbornness and the recalcitrance and the bitterness of the two camps. And I'm not a kumbaya, let's all get along person. You should know that, because I set up my tent and I fought as ardently as anyone else from the Bernie camp. But the stakes are even higher now. The stakes were high in 2016 for sure. We lost a lot by losing the White House and turning it over to Donald Trump. We lost a lot. All of us. I don't care which camp you come from. Every single one of us has lost a lot by Donald Trump being in the White House. If you want anything remotely on the liberal side of the spectrum, to the progressive left, to the socialist communist further left, if you want anything in those spectrums, you lost a lot in 2016. But the stakes are higher in 2020. People thought that if Donald Trump got elected, that a revolution was going to ensue. Yeah, no, that didn't happen. The only thing that happened was his 85 judicial appointees that included 2 Supreme Court picks, and now we have Ruth Bader Ginsburg who's hanging on by a thread. That's the only thing that has happened. every prophecy that this would be accelerationism, Donald Trump becoming president would lead to accelerationism and lead to a revolution. Every one of those prophecies was dead wrong, because there's nothing more that the American system is better at than co-opting revolutionary movements and absorbing protest. The Women's March is just a part of our annual ritual now. You know, hell, Antifa challenging Nazis. It's a part of our normal system now. All of us get incorporated into this system. But you know what has happened? We've made a concerted shift to the right on policy, whether it be from the environment. Not only a shift to the right on policy, but also actual tangible, not just legislation, but the rules, the agencies that were in charge of protecting us, the Consumer Financial Protection Agency. I forgot the entitle. That might be the name. I don't know. It skips my mind. He appointed people who were perfectly fit to undermine the work. So it's not just policy, but it's the actual physical, literal work of these agencies that we all have lost. And I'm putting the emphasis there for everyone, because whoever wins these primaries, if you don't go out and vote for that person, I don't care if they are a neoliberal shill. No, I don't. You know why? Because we have an even worse neoliberal in the White House right now, who is neoliberalism on steroids. I mean, people have lost. I mean, taxes have been cut for millionaires and billionaires, and poor people are paying more money. This is literally the conditions that we're in right now. And things can get worse. Worst. I didn't mean to put the T there, but it's there, and I'm not going to record it again. It can get worse. And I emphasize this on a day like today because Bernie Sanders probably will win the primaries. And the real question is, will Hillary Clinton supporters who are still as bitter about 2016 as any Bernie Sanders supporters? I think people have to take a second and realize, like, if you can't recognize the effing humanity in a person that you have like deeply seated disagreements with and bitterness from past battles, and you can't realize that they are as damaged from 2016 as the rest of us are, such that you don't care about the humanity in them. And the reason I say the humanity, because if you ever think you're going to win over Hillary Clinton supporters to actually vote for Bernie Sanders in the primary, in the general election, once he wins the primaries, it cannot be based on you spitting in their faces and say, bow down. Because ask yourself, would you bow down to anybody if they did the same to you? Which is the same message that I have to say to any Hillary Clinton supporters who listen to me, right? If Bernie Sanders wins, well, actually, no, I've already said that. If Kamala Harris wins the primaries, you cannot expect anybody to go with you, even to beat Donald Trump, no matter how high the stakes are. I can see how high the stakes are, and I don't really care. I'm willing to swallow whatever I have to, my pride, my ego, my bitterness about 2016. I'm willing to swallow it to get that madman out of the office, but not everybody's as reasonable as Benjamin Dixon. I mean, if I have to pat myself on the back, I will, because not everybody is going to be willing to do that if they are faced with a legion of bitter supporters who are going to drag this scorched earth fight of bitterness, this battle of attrition, this war of attrition that nobody is going to win, and simply win and hand this over to Donald Trump to get 2 more judicial appointments, 2 more Supreme Court picks, rather. I have to put this emphasis here because this is really the point that matters. I mean, Bernie's going to kick ass. The establishment is gearing up to support Kamala Harris. That's not a bad sentence. That's not an insulting sentence. It is literally what's happening, right? I don't say that as an insult. I don't care about her hot sauce in her bag. I think that's stupid. I care about her policies. I take issue with her policies as a prosecutor. I take issues with a lot of things, but I tell you one thing now, quote me on it, call me what you want to call me. My preference is Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, but if Kamala Harris gets the nomination, I'm going to wear a Kamala Harris t-shirt and go knock door to goddamn door, because the stakes are higher now than they were in 2016. We have so much damage since 2016 that it's literally going to take our entire adult lives. Unless we impeach Kavanaugh, which I don't think that they're going to do because they don't have the backbone to do that, which, yes, is part of the problem. But seriously, I need people to be really clear and sober about this. And F the Greens. I'm sorry. I know I have a lot of Green supporters in our audience, but I just have to say this idea that there is no such thing as a greater evil has given way to the greater evil. That was the dumbest thing that we had allowed to fester in 2016. People who can, who sit around and ideate and just kind of fill themselves with this, with their mental ruminations, and they just their mental their, not, what's the word I'm looking for, with their thought experiments about the greater evil. Right. And they try to logically explain to you why there's no such thing as a greater evil. We're living in the greater evil. A lot of people have intentionally tried to convince themselves, progressives have intentionally tried to convince themselves that Donald Trump is no different than Barack Obama. That's a goddamn lie. There are measures, like there's literal differences. I think people play this down, right? They try to say that there's no difference in the economic policies. And hell, I guess, what I've always said, I'm pretty fastidious with my words. What I've always said, that there's not enough difference. There's not enough difference. But that marginal difference that we're experiencing right now in the tax policy of Donald Trump demonstrates to you the power of just a marginal shift. The power of and what Trump did was not even marginal. He made drastic cuts for billionaires. And now average Americans who did not get a raise are paying more in taxes, literally gutting any hope, financial hope of us doing something that would sustain a safety net, literally reversing progress. And so while I'll be the first to yell at the top of my lungs that there is not enough difference between neoliberal Democrats and neoliberal Republicans, I will tell you that we're living in the difference right now.
The fight against injustice has been the work of his life.
Jobs and education, not jails and incarceration. We are not going to retreat on women's rights.
Sanders pushing a bold agenda that includes protecting DACA recipients and comprehensive immigration reform.
You don't rip little children away from the arms of their mother.
A major announcement from Amazon. Amazon will raise its minimum wage to $15 an hour. 350,000 workers.
Thousands of workers at Disney World will get raises. It's a victory for Bernie Sanders.
It's a victory for all workers. Brothers and sisters, we have a lot of work in front of us. If we are prepared to stand together, there is no end to what the great people of our nation can accomplish.
Okay, part 2 of the conversation. Can I just offer a piece of advice to Bernie Sanders supporters? It's advice that many Hillary Clinton supporters and people who are going to support, most human beings, okay, I could just summarize. Most people are not going to take this advice. But 2 things. I've already alluded to one. The first one I've spoke to in the first segment, but you're not going to attract people to your cause with obstinate bitterness and the pettiness of social media. If anything, we should have learned from 2016 that Twitter and social media is a surefire way to weaken our side of the equation. That's just it. I mean, we can divide ourselves into factions enough for us to not be able to get anything done. That's the lesson that we should have learned from 2016. Here's the other lesson that I would have hoped that people would have learned from 2016, but based on a tweet that I sent out 2-3 weeks ago, I don't think they have. And I know I mean, I have a big following, but I don't have a big enough following for it to be a substantive sample. But you gotta be able to take criticisms of your candidate, folks. You have to. Because one, if you don't, you're literally no better than all the sycophants that you talk about from other parties and other camps. And, you know, if you can't take criticism of your candidate, then you're just as bad as anyone else who you think can't take criticism about their candidate. You just can't. You're not, rather. You're no different. And you're in it. You want an echo chamber. You don't even want criticism that can help your candidate do better. You gotta be able to listen to people when they tell you the problems with Bernie Sanders. Instead of just trying to go find that one or two black people who are going to tell you Bernie Sanders is okay on race issues and completely ignoring everyone else, even us, those of us who supported Bernie Sanders in 2016, who clearly had his back on almost every single issue. And now we're telling you that he has a blind spot when it comes to race. But instead of listening, you attack not only us, but you go out and you're going to find you some black people who are going to tell you what you want to know. And I'm not starting this segment to irritate you. I'm starting this segment to let you know that if you want Bernie Sanders to win, you better listen to the black people who supported him in 2016 and have criticisms of him now, particularly on race. Same thing with other issues. He has blind spots. I mean, he has blind spots when it comes to a myriad of issues. And if for no other reason, and you know how people have solved this in the past. Oh, look, here's a picture of him marching with Dr. King. No, that wasn't a real picture. Well, here's a picture of him being, handcuffed with a black woman in the 60s. Yes, that was a real picture. And that's really dope, man. That's really dope. But, this is 2018, 19 now. And the lay of the land it's so fraught with minefields that Bernie doesn't even try to navigate. And that is the problem. And when I say Bernie, I am really speaking of his support staff. I'm speaking of his team. I'm speaking of his campaign staff, and I'm talking about him. There is a outstanding problem that exists in progressive circles. I know because I'm in these circles, of a certain level of blindness when it comes to race and the inability to communicate about these issues. And the unwillingness to dot your I's and cross your effing T's when it comes to the language that's necessary. It's like whether or not we're going to slow down and actually say, okay, could Ilhan Omar have actually benefited by composing a tweet that is actually a substantive critique of AIPAC versus just something that was left out there for conservatives and neoliberals to and actually let me correct myself, because I'm going to start using neoliberals correctly on my show. Conservatives and establishment liberals to use as fodder to, force her into submission with an apology that I personally don't think was necessary. But I think it's a good example of people offering criticisms and critiques of individuals' work, even though we know the essence of their work is genuine, right? We know the essence of what Ilhan Omar was trying to do was genuine, spot on. Nothing wrong with her intentions. Nothing about the accusations against her were valid. But damn it, yes, she could have composed the tweet better, and she did more damage than good when we absolutely needed someone bold enough and brave enough to traverse that minefield, but she didn't. She literally ran into the mines. And I'm saying this is a person that did not want to hear the criticisms of her. It took 2 conversations two different friends to really make me slow down and just admit, okay, fine. She could have been, the conversation could have benefited more had she presented an actual critique in a way that was fastidious enough. It's a minefield. It's a minefield, and there are going to be people who are going to blow it up just because that's true. And I hope you're drawing a parallel between everything I'm saying with Bernie Sanders, right? It's a minefield, and there are going to be people out there who are going to blow up minds just because. Absolutely. But does that mean that you as a candidate and you as an individual just run through the middle of the field and say, I don't care? If I'm going to extend that metaphor even further, then you're not even considering the collateral damage of people who are being killed by those landmines, politically speaking. Right? It does a disservice to the people who are on your side. Yes, you absolutely have to dot your I's and cross your T's when it comes to all politics. All politics. And what has happened over the last 2 years and what leading up to 2016 has been an enormous shift of people who simply say, reduce race issues into identity politics and dismiss identity politics and say that the solution to Bernie's race problem is for everybody to just forget about identity politics. Yeah, that's not going to work out for you. And that's something that plenty of us on this side of the equation, plenty of us who literally are going to get out here and stomp the streets on behalf of Bernie Sanders, we've been telling you this. And this conversation is not even about litigating race versus class and any of that. It really literally is about whether or not you can handle the basic critiques from people who want your candidate to do better, and because they're our candidate as well. But the inability to accept criticisms of our candidates is the problem. It's the cult of personality. You don't want to admit it, but Bernie suffers from a cult of personality just like everybody else. And the real question is about you as an individual, of whether or not you're going to hear the critique and then leverage your space, your personal social media space, as a person who's heard those critiques and is trying to perform better as a representative of Bernie Sanders. Like, we all have a role to play in this, right? That's the power of social media, is that you have a role to play in this, and you can decide how the people you interact with are going to view Bernie Sanders based on your actions. Literally the same advice that I could and should and would be giving to Kamala Harris supporters or whoever else is coming up. I don't know. But why would I give them the advice to win? Why would I give them the good advice? I wouldn't. I'm giving it to you because I like Sanders' platform and I think he's the best suited to beat Donald Trump. But I repeat, whoever wins these primaries, I'm putting on their t-shirt because there's a lot at stake in 2020.
So I graduated from college in 2017, and I currently pay roughly the equivalent of my rent in student loans every month. I have friends that graduated 6 figures in debt. Here in New Hampshire, students graduate on average with the highest average student loan debt in the nation.
36,000 or something like that.
It's absurd. Mm-hmm. And so I'd like to ask you, would you be willing to stand with my generation and end the student debt crisis by supporting free college for all? And would you include undocumented and formerly incarcerated people in that program?
Okay.
Wow.
If you could please just preface your answer with a clear yes or no, I would really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, let me answer you first of all.
No.
I think we have to do everything to help our students afford college. My idea is to make it easier to refinance. To start with your 2-year degrees, the community colleges being free. That's something that President Obama was pushing. There's a reason I'll get to why I'm starting there instead of 4-year. So I want to answer that question first for you. And let you know that I also had student loans, and when I married my husband, he had tens of thousands of student loans to make you feel better, but I married him anyway, all right? Okay, so here's what we need to do. The first thing is we need to make it easier to afford college. And you need to do that by making it easier to refinance these loans, by extending Pell Grants, so it includes more students. Those are simply grants, right? So if you extend those Pell Grants, that's going to make it even easier because right now it's for a limited number of students, and I think we should expand it to more students. I think that we should do as much as we can with some of the other populations that you referred to. We've got to make it easier for people getting out of prison to afford going to school, you name it. But the other thing I want to talk about here is something. I know we're in a 4-year degree school, a great school, but you also have in Manchester a 2-year community college. And there's a lot of kids right now who are off the grid, right? They don't graduate from high school.
Okay, I can't. I was going to try to listen to the whole, the entire clip to give, I guess, Klobuchar, however you pronounce her name. I haven't taken the due diligence to get the proper pronunciation because I don't think I need to remember her name. Except to say this, there will be an entire contingency of Democrats who are establishment. And by establishment, they are in bed with corporations. They're in bed with student loan lobbyists. They're in bed with the military industrial complex lobbyists. They're in bed with AIPAC. They're in bed with maybe the only one they're not in bed with is the NRA. And I guess, I'm sure I could find, there's a bit of irony there, but I'll leave that alone. There's going to be a whole bunch of Democrats trying to convince us of what can't be done. Literally, their platform, Klobuchar, whatever, her platform is about what can't be done. And that is being presented to us as virtuous, as a paragon of reasonable thinking, to not dream about what we could do or what we should be doing, but to convince us of what can't be done. And as ridiculous as that sounds, that's literally what they're doing. It sounds even more ridiculous when you consider the nations that are doing these things. She had a similar response in terms of Medicare, and Medicare for all specifically. Germany offers free education, free college education to their citizens, even at a unreasonably low price for tuition for foreign students. Many Americans go to Germany to participate in that free education. The UK has their National Health Service, their single payer system, essentially what we would have, which would be Medicare for all. So the developed nations that are literally doing these things, and we have people in the Democratic Party who are trying to convince us that they just simply cannot be done. And the reason they're saying those things is because they're in bed with lobbyists. They're in bed with Aetna. They're in bed with the insurance companies. And that's just a matter of fact. And it's actually something that I heard Sam Cedar say, right? Sam Cedar was responding to Pod Save America when Pod Save America put out a video, as if it was a really good video, making the case that all of us really want the same thing when it comes to Medicare, and we just have different ways of getting there. But that's not the truth. You know, they were literally making the case why it's totally progressive for someone to advocate for like an expansion of ACA versus a Medicare for all system. And on the merits of it, like on the face of it, it's like, oh, we all really just want people to get access to good health care. But underneath that very deceptive argument is the fact that the reason they are advocating against Medicare for all, it's because there's a vested interest for them to do so. And this is the nature not only of the Democratic Party, but even more so the Republican Party. It's just our political system in general. And so I'm bringing this up to say that there's plenty of Democratic candidates who are running, who are going to try to convince you of things that we cannot do, or try to convince you that the things that we're trying to do are unreasonable. But actually what I was trying to say, that the things that they are advocating for, like They're advocating for just protecting the Affordable Care Act, and they're advocating for universal coverage, right, versus the Medicare for All system. And the reason that is because, well, I've already explained it. And there's an entire contingency of the Democratic Party who, the majority of them. And this is why, I'm bringing this up, because the arguments on the merits, the arguments based on policy, that matters. The cult of personality things, the scorched earth disagreements about who said what, said this, when, and this tweet, and this misstep, and this misspoken phrase, and all those things, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter, except for, in my opinion, if you could have avoided it by being more fastidious, if you could have avoided it by paying more attention, then to me, that's an unforced error. That's where it matters to me. But in terms of the disagreements that we have based on policy, those things actually matter. And I didn't frame this up in order to defend myself. But I framed this up, one, because Klobuchar just gave me a great soundbite to just show you that there are literally people who are running to tell you this is all we can do, right? But then two, because I think it's important for us to understand what neoliberalism really is. It's not just it's not just establishment Democrats. It's a specific set of policies, economic policies, right? And those economic policies that are driven, they are driven by this political structure, this corporatism that drives our political system, this money and politics. That's the underlying support base for neoliberalism to have thrived the way it's thrived over the last 30, 40 years, for sure. But if you really understand what neoliberalism is, and you see the vein of neoliberalism in the Democratic Party, and you see how money and politics is choking progress from the Democratic Party, then you cannot simultaneously see that and ignore it, see it in the Democratic Party and completely ignore it in the Republican Party, and ignore the magnitudes of order of difference. You can't. And we have to go back to that episode where you know it really must be understood that if neoliberalism is your number one problem that's on your radar for if neoliberalism is the number one thing that you want to attack, then you should be fighting the Republican Party all the more, while we simultaneously fight against people like Klobuchar. And I don't honestly I think I did say earlier that whoever wins, I'm going to put on their T-shirt. She might be one of the people that I won't do that for, but thank God I don't think we're going to have to, because there's no chance in hell that she's going to win, not even a single primary. It's because ideas do matter, and we're moving to a place where if you're not even going to try to fight for progress on the key issues of our day, the environment, student loans, Medicare for all, contracting our military industrial complex, bringing it to an end altogether, whatever. I mean, that was a good phrase. That's what I was supposed to say, but you can't really, that requires to actually end it altogether requires, all sorts of volumes of work, right? But it's what I'm supposed to say, right? At a minimum, contracting the military industrial complex, the American imperialism, contracting it at a minimum. I think that's not controversial at all. That's like easy to do with 800 bases across the globe. So I'm sorry, I got off track. But the point is, if you're not going to advocate for the policies that we are pushing for and America is trending towards, that's why the right is losing their minds. It's because socialism and this perspective, this progressive perspective, is at the heart of this generation. And if you're not going to advocate for it, then you don't stand a chance. And that's why Bernie Sanders most likely is going to win this primary if he doesn't have any unforced errors that I've been trying to tell you guys about forever. See you tomorrow, folks. Take care.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.